Welcome to KnowledgeForMen.com, where you're going to grow into the man you want to be. Your life will never be the same again. I can guarantee it. After over 100 episodes, I've asked every guest, what are their most influential books? And so I've compiled a list of the most common books that kept coming up over and over. So I call this list the top 30 books that every man must live by. These books will help you become a better man faster than any other set of books out there. You can get this for free if you get your phone and text right now. Go ahead, you can whip out your phone. I know it's there. I'll wait. Still waiting. And just go ahead and text KFM free, one word, to 38470. Again, that's KFM free to 38470. All right, guys, we've all heard of the Ugg boots. The sheepskin boots, warm and fuzzy inside, and whenever it gets cold, they come out. What we have here is an international brand that did over $1 billion in 2012. So I'm here with the founder of Ugg boots right now, Brian Smith. He's here, and we're going to talk about the lessons, the story, and how he was able to build a brand out of nothing and do something that looked like was going to fail many times. So here we are, Brian. Happy to have you on the show. Let's dive in.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. Good to be here.
Brian, we start off every show. I like to kickstart the show with a favorite success quote or some sort of saying that the guest has lived by that's helped them on their journey. So what do you got for us? And then be sure to explain to the audience why you chose that.
Okay, well, I have several, but I think the most pertinent one is a phrase that I've come up with, which is you can't give birth to adults. And the philosophy behind that is something I've learned over 30 years of business. And every business or movement starts with conception, and then some action is taken, and that's the birth, like might be buying the first product or making the first widget. And then it goes into a horrible period called infancy, and it just lies there, and no amount of feeding or shaking or urging is going to make that infant get up and go to college. It just has to be an infant. And within a short time, though, the things will start moving. It'll become a toddler. People will be interested in the product or the service, and then it'll move into the youth, which is a great period because it's, for instance, when a kid can clean his own teeth, put his pajamas on, and eat at the table. It's a great period, and the same goes for business. If it's a really good product or movement, it'll hit the teenage years, and all bets are off. It wants to be everywhere at once. That's a really dangerous period. I almost lost UGG 3 different times during that teenage period, and then eventually the controls get put in place, and it hits maturity. So the theme of my book is based around the Ugg boot story, and it's really explanation of all of those phases that I went through and how I came up with that term.
Yeah, and I think the key there is that it takes time to build something great, and understanding that it's not all smooth sailing from the get-go. Just because it worked for somebody else, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. There's still things that take time to build, and you got to be patient with your business. I think that's why so many people give up, because they give up during the infant or the child stage, using your analogy, when it really wasn't supposed to be a success at first. It needed more water, and it needed to grow more. So I'm really excited at the direction that we're already going, and you're drawing a lot of parallels from your book, The Birth of a Brand, which is out. It's available on Amazon. But before we dive into some of the lessons from the book, let's go deeper and kind of just backtrack. And I want to really get the story of how Ugg boots started, what it was like when you started, and give us the nitty gritty. So go ahead and take the mic, Brian.
Okay. So how did I come over here? Well, I was a chartered accountant for 10 years in Australia, and I really didn't like any of that period. I actually hated accounting. But one of my characteristics is I hate to give up anything, so I stuck it out until I graduated. And I always knew that I wanted to do something for myself. And after a long period of trying to figure out what that was, I realized that all the cool products and things were coming out of California. And so I came to California looking for the next big thing like Levi jeans or waterbeds or surf clothing brands, which had all been really popular in Australia. And I was in California 2 or 3 months, and I realized that, so I hadn't found my thing, but I was reading a surf magazine one day and I saw this ad for sheepskin boots, and I just got these goosebumps and I went, oh my God, there are no sheepskin boots in America. So at the time, I would say 1 in 2 Australians owned some sort of sheepskin footwear. So I thought I was, like instant millionaire. So I started importing them, and I had worn them as a kid, so I knew how great they were, and I tried to get into the mainstream market from there. But the funny thing is, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to have a certain level of ignorance or innocence to do it, because if you knew of all the obstacles ahead, 99% of people wouldn't even go into it. My ignorance was that I didn't know that Americans had no idea how good sheepskin was. They thought it was hot, prickly, delicate, you can't get it wet, you can't wear it outside. Whereas Australians know it's rugged and you can mistreat it and you can wash it and it'll never wear out. So thinking I could get them into the American market was a bit of a joke, because we went around to the shoe stores in California, and all they said was, "What, you're crazy? Why are you trying to bring sheepskin to California?" And it wasn't until I figured out that all the surfers in California who'd been down to Australia, they all bought 3 or 4 pairs back for their buddies. So within the surf community, the Ugg boots or the sheepskin boots were really well known. And so me and my buddy who, started with me, we changed our direction. We started going after the surf market. And it was like, at first, they said, oh, fantastic, you guys are going to make a killing if you bring sheepskin boots in. But when we finally did buy 500 pairs and went on our first road trip, they all said, well, yeah, you're going to make a fortune, but we couldn't sell them out of this store because we just sell surfboards and shorts. And so the first year of our sales was $1,000, 28 pairs.
What's the time frame right now? Like, what year is it?
This was 1979. We, in our optimism, had bought 500 pairs. So that was one time we should have got out of business, but we couldn't because we had 480 pairs left to sell, And so we started doing swap meets, and I'd go up to surfing at Malibu, and I had a full range of product in the back of the van. And after my surf, I would just open up the back and sell to a bunch of people, because the word got out that the Ugg guys up at Malibu. And so I had almost like a little retail location going. But the difficulty was I couldn't get into the mainstream stores. 2 or 3 years, like we were doing pretty well in surf shops. We were running ads. We were posing these models on the beach at Wind and Sea. And 1980 was $30,000. Next year we got better looking models and better photographers, and the sales were $30,000. And the next season, the same thing, $30,000. And I was feeling like a real failure because I couldn't get into the mall stores. And I was at Montgomery Ward's buying office in Chicago. And the buyer, I gave my best pitch ever. And he just looked at me and said, Brian, why are you here? And I said, well, I want to get an order for the California mall stores. And he said, Brian, don't you get it? We're the elephants. We never move until the mice are running around under our feet. And like instantly I knew what he meant. And until I got all the specialty stores just like out of control, the malls weren't going to move. So I got back to California like after that trip and called up a buddy of mine who had a surf shop down in Ocean Beach. And I was telling him the problem I had. He called over his shoulder to these little grommets who were back in the back end of the surf shop, these 14-year-old kids, and said, hey, you guys, what do you think of UGG? And they all came out saying, oh, those things are so fake, man. Those surfers, the models, they can't surf. And it just hit me again that, wow, I'm sending the wrong message to my target market. So within a couple of days, I called up a buddy of mine who was a former world surf champion, Peter Townend, and he was running the National Scholastic Surfing Association. And I said, Pete, you got any young kids who are going to turn pro soon? I haven't got much money, but maybe I could pay them Ugg boots. And he gave me a guy called Mike Parsons, who I started doing advertising with him and following him down to surf spots and just running ads of him and a couple of other surfers in the magazines. And like overnight, first of all, the moms were getting like badgered by the kids. Hey, mom, everyone's got Ugg boots at school. All the cool kids, I want Ugg boots for Christmas. So the moms start walking the malls. To Kinney's, do you have Ugg boots? No, what are Uggs? At Tom McCann, do you have Ugg boots? What are Uggs? And Nordstrom's, do you have Ugg boots? And they were just getting shut out. But over in the surf shop arena, where the moms who were in the know, it was just going wildfire. It was as fast as we could ship product out of the warehouse, the retailers were selling out. And that season, we did $400,000. So it jumped from 30 to 400,000 purely because we found the right image, and the product was great. And the best part of it was the mice were walking the malls. And the next season, we opened up every mall store. So that was, a great struggle, but we eventually overcame it just by hanging in there, being an infant. And I've got another saying that I like, which is the quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog is to live every day as a tadpole. And in other words, what we were doing every day, we were tadpoling it, just trying to make it work, trying to make it work, trying to make it work. And eventually the trigger came to launch us from infancy into the toddling phase.
That's a great story right there, that you bounce from 30,000 to 400,000 in just one season. But one thing that I keep hearing from this story is you keep talking about the season. So I'm wondering, the Ugg boots, obviously it's like a warm shoe type boot, so it sounds like a seasonal item. So how did you kind of overcome this barrier here of having a seasonal product, and what about the other 8 or 9 months of the year?
No, that's a great point. The worst part of the Ugg boot business was the seasonality. And it was okay in the beginning because, I had part-time jobs. I remember the first year in the summertime, I was working, scraping boats underwater at Marina Del Rey. The next season I was working as a contract, like a laborer up in Bel Air in all the big mansions there. Another year I was on the road stripping out computer mainframes to ship all of the insides back to San Diego. So I kept alive during that. But when it got to be like a $2 or $3 million business, it was extremely difficult because you had to ramp up for like a $3 million business for 3 months. And then there was nothing because the retail always works on seasons. And for instance, in the fall, they'll bring in all the product early for winter. But by December, they're already trying to quit all that and get ready for spring, which is coming in January. So we had to fall within that cycle. And then because we were a weather-related product, if it was a cold winter, we did fantastic. If it was a warm winter, it didn't. So when you look at all of the elements of a business, the seasonality meant our cash flow was horrible because we had 3 months of really positive cash and 9 of red. We had to gear up for all of our trade shows and buying samples in January, February. So all the cash we just made went out the window. And I think the first 3 years, I was living on credit cards every summer. Then once we shipped the product, you had a pretty long lead time to get the money back because you had to ship in September and you usually didn't get paid till December. So it just had a lot of the bad elements purely because of the seasonality.
Yeah. And so did you try and pivot in any way and try and come out with year-round clothing items? How did you work around this problem?
We actually didn't. I got to say, I tried a little sandal line that I found from Australia called Lois Lane Shoes. But that was like, the Ugg boot business was such a specialty business. You had to know all about sheepskin and seasonality. But I didn't understand fashion. And so, all my efforts to get into T-shirts and branded clothing didn't work. The one thing that did work was when snowboarding first first came on, right in the very early 80s, we did a snowboard clothing line, but that did fantastic, but it was also seasonal for the winter, so it didn't help us in the summer. It wasn't until I got probably 5 or 6 years down the road where I was able to get an investor who could give me some breathing space through the summer where I could, actually work on marketing programs and trade show booths and all that sort of stuff during the summer without having to get a summer job.
And I know getting an investor isn't easy. We've all seen Shark Tank, but what was the path like for you to get an investor? And did early investors take you seriously when you first started looking with the seasonal type of brand you were?
Oh boy. Okay. First of all, they want to see a sort of a track record to give some comfort to them. I had a great track record of 3 months every year, but then they saw that the other 9 months was a drag. So that was a big red warning flag for them. The biggest problem, though, I used to do business plans, and I'd go around to the banks and I'd say, look, I've doubled this year. I've got pre-orders for next year, and I kept getting, that's a fad. That'll never last. Now that happened with banks and institutional investors for probably 5 or 6 years. Even though I was doubling from 1 to 2 million, 2 to 4 million, 4 to 8 million, they were still saying UG's a fad. It'll never catch on. The other thing is investors, they're most interested in the security of their investment, number one. Like they put in capital, they want to know it's not going to get wasted. And number two, they want to know when they can get it back out. Number three, they want to know what the return is. And it's pretty much in that order: safety, getting out, and what's my return. And the UGG business was so unpredictable because of that seasonality. It was very hard for institutional banks or investment venture capitalists to buy into it. So I was always left to the whim of trying to find, individual investors who would invest. And it invariably came down to September, October, where I had product already made in Australia, but they wouldn't release it until they got letters of credit. And I couldn't get the letters of credit until I got an investor. And it always came down to September of desperation with when I could prove to the investors, look, these surf shops are screaming down the phones for their product. Just help me get a couple of $100,000 letter of credit to start. And I always managed to pull it off, but it was always down to the wire. I often wish I had a business that was, selling 4 quarters of the year and was self-funding, but UGG was just very, very difficult.
Yeah, I could see that. So it sounds like you guys are working extremely hard for a short amount of time. And obviously this is during the winter season. So if that's the case, then you got to have the right team in place. So when you're building your team, what are you looking for when you're building a team?
Well, let's go back to the early days. I just had to get part-time help for the September, October, November, December periods. So there wasn't much there wasn't a stringent processing of help back then. I needed secretarial help and accounting help, which was easy to get. But as it started to grow, I was able to attract some salespeople, and they already were on fire for the product. They had worn UGGs, they knew about UGGs, they were passionate about the product. And most of the people that I hired came in with the attitude of, wow, this is a really cool brand, a really cool product. And they quickly became true believers. So I needed, for instance, I needed computer help. The desktops were just starting back then in the mid-'80s. And so I needed somebody who could program and do that. So, I found friends who were in that business. But I, really didn't need to have an HR department or a recruiting program, because it seemed like when you start out on a business, the universe conspires to work with you, and people just sort of fell in place as we went along. Now, I know that's very unusual for, most businesses where they go out and look at resumes and stuff, but my growth was extremely organic, and the right people just happened to fall in place at the right time.
So as you were growing, just people started showing up and filling in those spots that needed to be filled.
Yeah, very organic. It's almost like it was ordained or something like that. That's the wrong word, but it was just It was just like, programmed. It was really funny.
And so eventually you decided to sell UGG to Deckers, which
Yeah.
is a publicly traded company. So, what led you to make that sell?
Okay. There was two factors. The first one was that I'd bought investors in around 1990, and they provided a pretty good chunk of capital to grow the business. We went from, with that group of investors, we went from like 8 million to 15 million or 13 million. And we were able to, finance the production because that was always the problem. We didn't have that much overhead really, but financing production, at first we started out, we wanted $100,000. That's easy. 300 easy, half a million. They're starting to get a little nervous. But when we started getting into the millions for purchasing product, the manufacturers all wanted safety and security of letters of credit. So let's get back to my 15 million sort of period. We had orders in 95 we had 12 or 13 million written. We knew it'd be 15 easily before November, and usually our Christmas sell-through gave us another 20%. So we were looking at an 18, $19 million season. And I knew that my investors did not have the ability to raise that much capital to or credit to buy the product in. And so I was always aware of this guy, Doug Otto, because remember I was selling boots out of the back of the van in Malibu?
Yeah, yeah.
He had a van like two or three parking spaces up, and he was selling these triple decker thongs, or sandals, little neoprene sandals. And he had built his business up. He ended up calling his company Deckers because of the triple decker sandals. And he'd taken on a bunch of surf brands, Lightning Bolt and surf, wetsuit businesses. But he really hit it when he took on a license for Teva sandals. And when the outdoor market took off, he went public on the Teva brand. And so I knew he had, a huge amount of capital in the bank. And it was this year when I knew it was February. I was going to a trade show in Atlanta, and I knew we had all these orders pending. And I saw Doug at the baggage claim, and I got goosebumps again. And, goosebumps is my way of my spirit telling me, hey, this is the right thing to do. And I walked down and said, Doug, if ever we're going to do this, put these companies together, now's the right time. And I knew it was a perfect fit because we used to die every summer without sales, and his company died every winter. And he'd tried to buy us a couple of times before, but I sort of joked that he couldn't afford us. But now was the right time. And I said, Doug, if we're going to do it, let's do it now. And that afternoon, we had the accountants talking to each other, and that began the process of selling out.
All right, and so there's the sell-off right there. But now I want to talk about the fear of starting a business, because I think that's where a lot of people kind of run into challenges, is with like they don't know exactly how to do it.
Yeah.
You didn't have a roadmap either. You experienced a ton of challenges with brand alignment and reaching the target market with the right message. And you even said that you had a few summers on your off seasons where you were doing manual labor just to keep your business afloat. So, I respect that struggle. I really do. I respect the struggle. And, I'm wondering, what kept you going with UGG? And if you knew that you'd have to go through all of this in advance, would you still do it?
The very first question you asked was, so many people don't start because they don't know how. I confront, or I am confronted with people who go, yeah, I've got this great idea, but I don't know how to get a business license. And I think, God, I've never had a business license. You just have to start. Ignorance is a big part of an entrepreneur getting going. And my book is all about just getting out and starting. And there are no roadmaps, especially if you have a new product like I did. But nearly everybody who's getting into a business with a new novel twist on something that may already be out there, that you're in new territory. Getting to the other part of your question, though, if I was to advise people now, which I do, I consult with people, I would and I do say, look, there are business plan programs that you can buy that will walk you through the thinking process. And that is, had I filled out a business plan program, or the questionnaire when I first started, and I came up upon seasonality, it would have made me realize, oh my God, I went into this with 20,000. Well, I first of all borrowed $500 to get the samples, then we raised 20 grand to buy that first 500 pairs. But had I known that we were going to go into this seasonal thing, I probably wouldn't have started there. And had I known that, done my market research and realized that Americans didn't understand sheepskin, I wouldn't have started again. And so there are all these things that I think people should be aware of, because most people are probably, I don't, that's the wrong statement. A lot of people will not have the determination and the stick to it, attitude that I had. And my faith in the product was, a lot of it was because so many people in Australia wore the sheepskin footwear, and I knew Americans aren't that much different, even though they didn't get sheepskin. So for me, it was a matter of time. So that's why I hung in and hung in and hung in. But I think for businesses that are more mainstream and aren't quite as radical, that you can get a lot of really good information from business plan programs that will make you think through cash flow, marketability, marketing, inventory control, staffing, all that sort of stuff, and put numbers to it. Had I done that at the beginning of the UGG program, I would have realized I needed $500,000 to start. You know what I would have done? Walked away from it. But it comes back to that certain amount of ignorance and passion for your product, and knowing that one day it's going to be a big thing.
Yeah, and now coming out of that, walking away from that period, you experienced a lot of ups and downs, a lot of challenges, and I'm sure you came away from that experience a whole new person, a whole new man. So what life lessons did you walk away with?
The best one is that your most disappointing disappointments often become your greatest blessings. And time after time, just these disasters would happen. One example is the back around when we were doing 2 to 3 million, I had to get bigger investors in and buy the old ones out, which was a common theme, and most businesses that grow will do that. And I brought in 3 new investors, and we were all going to have 25% each of the company. But I didn't get my 25% until I finished up this little lawsuit that was going on with a company called UGHS. And I was out on the road the first day after we signed all the documents, and went at Huntington Surf and Sport, and the guy said, "Hey, Brian, I heard you sold the business." I went, "What?" "Yeah, I heard you don't own it anymore." And I went, "What are you talking about?" And I couldn't wait to get out of there, and I went to the gas station next door and called up the new owner, my new partners. I said, "What are you telling people?" And he said, "Well, Brian, you don't own any stock until you do the trademark thing." And I was like totally demoralized, and I retreated for like 3 days. I just was going, talk to my fiance, going, what'll I do? Will I get another job? Should I become a business broker, real estate? But I'd sort of come to like sales, and I thought, oh, well, I'll get a sales job, And then I thought, well, if I'm going to sell something, I may as well sell something I love. So I became the sales rep for UGG. For my own company, I negotiated a deal to become the Southern California sales rep. And so instead of just giving up and walking away because of that disaster, I sort of hung in there. And after a month, I got back to the warehouse, and Neil gave me a check for $5,000. And that was the first money I'd ever drawn from the business. And this is nearly 6 years into it. And then the following month, he gave me a check for $10,000. And all I was doing was out being on the road with all my buddies in the surf shops, hanging out, looking after inventory and checking on orders and stuff. And the next month, another $10,000. And I realized, oh my God, that disaster actually turned out to be one of the best things that's ever happened. And I will say that over the 30 years of business, that when I look back on nearly everything that was a disaster at the time, I look back and I sort of think, well, thank God that happened, because look where I am now.
And just to clarify, did you ever clean up that lawsuit that was withholding that check?
Yeah, in a bizarre way, I ended up with 100% of the business back. I finished the lawsuit, and then for like 3 years, I was just on the road making so much money, 60, 70, 80,000 a year, and was playing golf in the summer, and I wasn't doing any ordering or shipping or accounting or nothing. I was just working with the sales rep. But then during that period, Neil, who was the majority player in that group, bought the other two guys out, and he was, bought us company cars and got a life insurance policy on it, on him and me. And I was just getting ready to sign in to buy my 25% or get my 25%. And he died in a motocross accident. So I had to go back in for the year. I didn't even own the business, but I decided to try and help out his widow and figure out where the business was at. And it wasn't pretty. I thought, when we were buying the cars and everything, we were doing really great, but we made a loss for the year, and said to his widow, look, you don't know how to run the business. I do, and I'm interested, but I need to buy it from you. And right then, the life insurance policy that Neil had taken out paid off, and I had the money to buy it back. So in a complete fluke, there's another disaster that turned into one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I ended up with 100% of the company back.
Wow, that's another disaster that turned into an opportunity for yourself. But what role do you play with UGG now? What is your current role with UGG?
I have had nothing to do with the administrative or the sales side of it since I sold the company, and it was just about to go to 20 million when I sold it. They've since taken it on. Connie Rishwain, who's the president of the UGG brand within the Deckers Corporation, she deserves all the credit with her team for taking it to the $1 billion mark. Brilliant marketing, brilliant product, diversification, and incredible image. So I have stayed friendly with them all the time. I've consulted with them on trademark issues and legal issues for the past 15 or 18 years. And now I'm back pretty close with them because I've written the book, and I've made sure that they've been a part of the ongoing process to make sure that they're happy with what I've written, which they have. And Connie's written a testimonial on the back of the book, which I'm really proud of. So I'm, my involvement is just strictly friends, and as you can imagine, as being the founder, you're always the founder, and I am still proud as anything every time I see somebody walking on the street wearing sheepskin boots.
Wow, that's got to be a great feeling. Yeah, and even the knockoffs. I mean, you still created that image.
Yeah.
I'm just in my chair here, just being moved by your story about how you turned some of your greatest disasters into your greatest opportunities, and that's what I'm really pulling from this interview right now. And what I find funny is, sometimes we don't see the opportunity when we're in the disaster. We just want them to go away. We're like, this is horrible. I don't like this. But sometimes those disasters are the solution, and they're just sitting right there in front of you.
Yes, yeah. It's like a fork in the road, you can take the smooth path, but that's just going to keep giving you more of the same. And sometimes you get forced down the rocky path, and that's where all the growth happens.
Yeah, I really like that. I really, really like that. And now, Brian, let's move into the knowledge round. So I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions here. So are you ready for the knowledge round?
I have no idea what's coming, but let's do it.
The one thing that's made all the difference in my life, business, and relationships is reading the right books and taking action. So I want to give you a free gift. It's a list of the top 30 books that every man must live by. So here's how you can get it. Just grab your phone out right now. Go ahead and do that. I know it's near you. Okay, you have it out. I know you're thinking about doing it, but you haven't just grabbed your phone out. So just get your phone out, and you can text KFM free. That's one word, KFM free to 38470. Again, that's KFM free to 38470. I guarantee you here in this list, you're going to find many books that are just going to dramatically change your life. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. All right, and first question here, Brian. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling kind of lost or unsure of what they should do with their life?
Okay, I was in my living room listening to the very first time I heard Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, and it said, "No one told you when to run, you missed the starting gun." And I got goosebumps, and within days I was in my real friend's office who was a travel agent and booked my ticket to California. So for those people who are frustrated, if you haven't figured out what you want to do, I urge you to think of what can you do better than anybody else, and then just do it. You'll make a fortune. The other thing is, if you have found what that special thing is, get out and do it. There's no certainty ahead of you. Just get out and do it, and sort of take the licks as they come.
Yeah, there it is. And what was holding you back from being the man you are now today, Brian?
I think, if I be perfectly honest, it's a matter of worthiness. I've always felt like, oh my God, do I deserve, to sell this business for millions of dollars? I'm just this kid from Australia. And that type of attitude held me back for years and years and years of being bigger and, faster than I could have been.
All right. And Brian, can you name a mentor, someone who's had a tremendous impact on your life? And can you name a specific moment that you guys shared that was really impactful for you?
I think one of the final investors that I brought in was another Australian, Alan Greenway, who he gave me some of the best advice on becoming more of a director, more of a orchestrator of the business instead of being in their hands-on doing everything. It was like pulling fingernails at first to make me let go of all these things, because I thought I was the only one that could do it. But over time, I became more of a director of the orchestra. And his great quote was, over and over I heard this, was, "If you can't act effectively, don't act." And I have lived to that mantra ever since. That's the last 15, 20 years. Best advice I ever got: if you can't act effectively, don't act, because in another day or a week or a month, you'll have all the information or all of the ability to act effectively.
Yeah, really good. And this should be challenging. You're an author now. I'm sure you read a ton of books. What are your 3 most influential books, and explain why?
One was by Richard Branson. I think it was Losing My Virginity. And there was only one paragraph in that just changed me. He said that of all the years since I've started Virgin, from selling newspapers on the streets of London through to the airline, I have never had the luxury of not having to raise money. And I always thought I was a failure because I kept needing new investors, but really that's a badge of growth. And I sort of forgave myself for being that supposed failure. Other books, I love spiritual books, too many to name. And I just like Wilbur Smith action stories. So they're the 3 categories.
Really good books right there. And if you guys want to pick up one of those books for free, you can go to kfmbook.com and you can get one of those books in audio book format. That's kfmbook.com. And now, Brian, what 2 or 3 life skills do you need in order to succeed in your field?
One is determination, which can be called passion. It could be called ability, whatever, but just determination to see it through. Another one is to be friendly and maintain good relationships with everyone you deal with. And that also has a sort of a streak of honesty about it, because that's what prolongs good relationships. And the other one is the most important one, is to just live life day by day. Remember the tadpole scenario. There's a certain evolution that has to take place with every business, just like the evolution of a planet. if I had $1 million the year I started, I would have wasted $900,000 and not really advanced the business at all. It has to evolve organically. So patience and just be happy being a tadpole.
All right. And scenario here for you, Brian. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
God, what a question. I would say love yourself and believe in yourself. Believe in you, Brian. You can do anything that you set your mind to. And I would say don't be afraid of public perception. If you believe it in your heart, then that's your path. Forget about all the naysayers, because there's, for every 50% who's going to love what you do, there's going to be 50% who put you down. So just believe in yourself.
And Brian, do you have an underrated characteristic that you believe if every person would work on this skill that they could see massive results in their life?
What a question. I think for me, just accepting how good you are, it's always been a struggle. I've felt this sort of humility, but because it was like I didn't feel like I deserved it. But I think if everyone can just know that they are worthy of the absolute best the universe has to offer, then that's what they should be working on.
Yeah. And now just kind of reflecting back on your career and what you've done, what you've created, the international brand, basically an icon, what would you say is your philosophy on life and success?
Well, I went through many, many years of like breadline existence, building the UGG brand. And then I went through periods of millions. And then I invested in some building product, lightweight concrete and steel product, which went fantastic for 4 or 5 years and then got wiped out in the recession. And my lifestyle has not changed one bit. In fact, when we sold UGG and we had millions of dollars, my wife and I think we bought new carpet for the house and a Honda minivan for her, and that was all we bought. So I've just had this fabulous ability to be happy where I'm at, and it doesn't require a ton of money. It does require some money, but it doesn't require millions. And that quality is probably the one thing that's never changed.
I like it. Living a simple life, keeping it down to the surfer roots. So yeah, let's talk about what you're doing today now. Like bring it down to this morning, what's getting you out of bed and what's really exciting you.
Well, unfortunately, I'm in the infancy of a completely new industry, which is authorship and speaking. And I wish I could accelerate it, but there's absolutely nothing I can do. It took a couple of years to write the book. It's up there now, but we're making the actual push for everybody to buy on December the 2nd. And I've given a lot of speeches from the stage. I find that I have a very, very powerful message, which is pulled right directly from the book. But the points I speak to, I have so many people come afterwards and say, "Oh my God, Brian, thank you. I was going to give up, but now I see where I'm at in the stage of my business, and you've given me new heart to carry on." And that is a very, very precious feeling for me. And, giving back to people to help them on their path is probably more fulfilling than any amount of dollars I could make. So, yep, I'm in the infancy of a whole new business, and I hope to get into the toddler stage on December 2nd and start youth, shortly thereafter.
All right, guys, check out Brian Smith's book, The Birth of a Brand, on Amazon. It's available now in December, so you can check it out and pick it up.
Yeah, and if you want a preview, go to www.briansmithspeaker.com. You can download chapter 1 and get a little preview.
All right, Brian, thank you so much for sharing your story with my community here today. You're giving me your time today and dropping some really deep, challenging lessons that you've overcome in your business. I thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Hey, my pleasure. I hope I've helped somebody.
All right, and that's going to wrap up episode 115 with Brian Smith, the founder of UGG. Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast show. It's been a pleasure having you be a part of a thriving community of men who want to crush it in all aspects of life. I'm on a mission here to inspire millions of guys, and with your help, we're going to make a dent in the universe. Check out knowledgeformen.com for a ton of free content that's designed to help you live a remarkable life. Again, that's knowledgeformen.com. I hope to see you there. And always remember, 2014 is the official year of the crush, where we take action to get the life we've always dreamed of. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and until next time, let's do it.